We're good, Jay? Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Ulster County Industrial Development Agency meeting on Wednesday, September 21, 2022, and it is 9:15 a.m. Apologies for a late start. We were having some technological issues as well as waiting for board members for a quorum. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call. Lynn Archer is, Lynn? Present? Present. Lynn is participating remotely. Mike Ham?
Here.
Steve Kelly is absent with notice. Rashida Tyler?
Present.
Rachel Silverman?
Here.
And Kastu Baha?
Here.
And Diane Einen Chair, I am here. Lynn is present, but given our guidelines, she will not count as a quorum, but we do have a quorum today. And for any votes, Lynn's vote will be recorded, but will not count towards the vote. All right. Read the mission statement of the Ulster County IDA. The mission of the Ulster County Industrial Development Agency is to advance the job opportunities, general prosperity, and long-term economic vitality of Ulster County residents by targeting tax incentives, bonding, and other assistance to foster creation and attraction of new business and the retention and expansion of existing business. All right. If you could please make note of the minutes from our August 17th meeting. You'll find them on page 3. Please review and ask for a motion to approve the minutes from August 17th.
Chair, I move to accept the minutes from the previous meeting.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Public comment, agenda items only. Do we have anyone, Amber, here for public comment? Remotely, otherwise? No? All right. All right. At this time, I would like for us to go into executive session. Bill, this is going to be to discuss personnel matters, and hopefully it won't take too long.
Yeah, personnel matters, yes, employment history, and also pending litigation,
Yeah.
too.
Which case?
It's the Kingstonian case. Yep.
Thank you. All right, Jay, if you can stop recording. Thank you. All right. May I please have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And no action was taken during executive session. All right. Chair's report. There has been a lot of activity transitioning to our new staff. I want to thank Jay and Amber and Vicky again for all their support and help as we've begun working with them the past month. It's been really great. And so I've asked Amber to give us an update on all those related matters, so I won't spend the time in the chair's report going over that. I do want to let you know that Zinc 8 that I share with you has been looking at the Ulster County as a place for their new operation. And so I attended a gateway meeting in September after our board meeting with all of the key towns and agencies, so Zinc 8 representatives and folks from Deloitte who is working with them could better understand what the different agencies are, approvals that they'll need. And I was there in terms of the IDA and what potential finance inducements and other things that they could think about through the IDA.
Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Can you just give us a quick rundown on what Zinc 8 does?
Zinc 8 is essentially a organization, they're a Canadian company, and as best I can do this, is that they basically are providing for battery, and they use zinc and I think hydrogen. They do it differently. They're not producing lithium batteries. Yeah. So they're using this technology. And what they're looking specifically, as best I understand it initially here, is they're not going to be manufacturing, but they're going to be assembling here in Ulster County. And that's as best I can describe it without completely butchering it, I think. Kastu?
I can add,
Yeah.
they're a public company, Canadian.
Yeah.
They're listed, about $45 million in size, a small company. They're assembling. Chuck Schumer had reached out as well to initiate that they should come here.
Mm-hmm.
They use zinc and oxygen technology to develop this. It's essentially they're manufacturing components in different places, assembling, as you said,
Mhm.
Chair. And I think they're trying to figure out how to best utilize the technology
Mhm.
domestically as well.
Yeah, right. And so they're looking at locations, but Ulster County is, from what I can understand, a top of their list. I've since then, Joe and I have been in several meetings, and Joe more than I have had follow-up meetings with them to better understand our financing mechanisms, the requirements for those things. The CEO has been on those calls. He's very committed to the project. I think he's also someone that speaks often about not only having a business in a town, but also being part and the fabric of that community as well. And that's very important, I think, to him and the company. So there's a lot of folks that are working on this, working closely with Zinc 8. Tim Wiederman from our economic development group, and Tim and I have been in touch also as things have been progressing. I do expect, Zinc 8 has told me that they expect to have an application into us on the 23rd of this month, so in just a few days. Our process then would be I'll put together a pre-screen group that will do just that. There'll be a pre-screen, they'll go through the application, they'll meet with Zinc 8 representatives, any questions, and then when those questions are satisfied, the application is back to us. When that's ready, we'll bring it forward to the board. The board will have an opportunity to review it in advance, the application, meet with the representatives and answer any questions. They'll be here to answer any questions that we might have for them. So that's where we are with the Zinc 8. Last week, I attended the Ulster County Green Network Summit at SUNY New Paltz, invitation from Tim. Again, this is business to business coming together to talk about what a green economy looks like in Ulster County. And so I went there to learn, essentially, and to listen and to get a better idea of what businesses are out there and if there's anyone potentially that may be a project for the IDA. I will say nobody bubbled up immediately, but it was a good meeting, and it was good to meet people in the community. As I mentioned, Tim and I have our weekly update, so keeping in touch with economic development. So anything that's coming up on a horizon, Tim's been sharing. And right now, I think the big one is Zinc 8. And then I've also asked Tim to come to the board, maybe our November or our December board meeting, to talk with the board about the work out of his office and what his views are for economic development as we move into the new calendar year. And lastly, and Amber will talk about this, it's important, as I shared with you when we first met for the education orientation meeting, that all new board members have to go through state training within 1 year of their appointment. And so Amber sent some potential dates out to all of you. And please make sure that you follow up with Amber and let her know your availability. That would be really helpful. So we need to make sure that you all go through that process. And that is it for the chair's report. I'm now going to turn it over to Amber to talk with us about financials, accounting, and administrative update.
A digital file, which I'm actively reviewing and sorting through. We haven't yet received the physical files, but we're working on how to obtain those, get those into this office, and that's currently in the works. We are actively changing online passwords as we access them. The website information is up to date and current. There's a workaround directing individuals to the legislature's site temporarily while we get the IDA site all fixed up and all functional. The telephone number was disconnected, and so we're aware of this issue, and we're going to be working to correct it in short order. We have 2 reoccurring costs that we've identified on the credit card statement. I do think it's possible to connect these directly with the bank account, so that might be something for board consideration, which would simplify the accounting of those charges, as well as just the process of how they're completed. We talked about the ABO training, so I have heard from 3 board members already on that, so that's great. I myself have signed up as the requirement also pertains to management of the agency. And so some of the most urgent matters currently are getting the financial statements up to date and current. So the prior administrators used QuickBooks software for their accounting. QuickBooks is really user-friendly and is affordable. What I would ask the board to consider is how to proceed with that software. So QuickBooks offers a number of different options for purchase, one being an online login where anyone can log in. You have a monthly subscription. You can limit access, and for that you have to have 1 subscription per agency. So there would be 1 for the IDA, 1 for the CRC. They also offer a desktop option, which is more affordable, but it's computer driven, so hardware driven. So the agency would need hardware. You would need a computer with that option. So that's something to consider. And I have the pricing information if anyone's interested in discussing it now. Other than that, really of urgent need is getting those financials up to date and then proceeding with the development of a budget, which is due 60 days before the fiscal year ends.
So I think, thank you for the QuickBook update. So the question for us is, do we want to put the software,
You're-
do we want to put the QuickBook softwares on a desktop, 1 user, that's it, or do we want to go with multiple options and desktops and access to the QuickBooks? And the pricing, I think, is about just under $400 for desktop and a little over $1,000, right, for the multiple user?
For year 1, they offer a 50% off discount. So in the first year, the It's about $1,000 for the online access, and I think that QuickBooks is going to offer $350 for the desktop access, and then they require an update annually to that. After the first year, it's about $800 right now, the way their pricing is structured. The online version is about $2,000 annually.
So I guess the question that I had, and for all of you, just wouldn't spend too much time on this, is that right now we have a staff put together. We're also working on our permanent organizational structure. Does it make sense to have it on one desktop, secure, one user? We don't have a laptop, right? So do we then, if we go with the online and multiple users, do we want to purchase a laptop? Then it would make sense to do that. So I just wanted, it would be helpful for Amber to have some sense of direction from the board. Usually this would just be a pretty easy decision to make, but again, given where we are right now administratively, I think it makes it a little bit more complicated.
Which technology were we using previously?
QuickBooks.
The desktop version or the desktop version?
Yeah.
So what is the advantages of everybody having access to the financials?
I'm going with one person.
I'm going with one also.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. One person.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Do you want to proceed with the desktop version then?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about the purchase of an agency laptop then?
It seems reasonable.
I think that's fine. That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Let's do that.
Okay.
I guess the other quick question too is the credit card. We do have a credit card. I don't even know whose name is it in right now. It's
There's just the IDA right now. There's really no direct name on it. We had people removed from it. You didn't hear anything about that card being canceled, correct?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Could you follow up with M&T on that? I have the contact for M&T.
I received a statement from them this week.
Okay.
And it doesn't say
Anything.
closed. It has an
But
outstanding balance.
Nobody's name was on it, correct? Just the IDA?
There was a name on it.
Was it, they were,
Mhm.
okay, we'll take care of that again.
okay. So the question we have though is we talked about before is do we want to cancel that card and reissue it in someone else's name, or do we want to find another way, perhaps if the staff can charge an invoice back to the IDA?
So, I don't know how Amber feels about this, but Amber's going to be dealing with the incidentals all the time and need access to that card. I would say that past practice was that, the executive director, the CEO, whoever had access to that card, and their name was on it, and it gave them longitude and latitude. I would strongly suggest that Amber would take on that role. But how are you? Are you comfortable with that?
When I'm reviewing the
Mm-hmm.
IDA's records, my personal goal would be, or recommendation would be, to see you guys successfully continue through any turnover and continue as a standalone agency, not necessarily tied to one person.
Mm-hmm.
And being that this is currently a 6-month contract, I feel
Yeah.
hesitant towards that option.
I see what you're saying. So hypothetical situation, we have Rachel become the steward for the card. That would just mean that you would have to get a hold of Rachel. Rachel would have to approve that, provide the information for the card. I was just trying to cut the middleman out with it. I can't do it, Diane can't do it, all right, because we sign checks. So
Yep.
no one that signs checks can be on that.
Yeah.
So, or should be on, correct.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure out who wants to be on the card.
Right, I mean, if you don't think that extra step is going to be, if you don't think that extra step is going to be an extra burden to
Mhm.
what you're doing, then it makes sense to me also, for the reasons you said, that that we have someone on the board be the contact for that. There's also the issue of once we put the card in someone's name, and I don't know what the regular balance looks like, but we are impacting the credit of a staff person.
That's right.
And that's,
That's the other
that's
thing.
not
Mhm.
inconsequential,
No.
especially if the role is currently for a 6-month contract, so.
So Rachel, perhaps we can put you as assistant treasurer because Steve is a treasurer, but he's on audit, and that would not make sense to do that. So
I'm okay doing it, and I have absolutely lost track of who can and can't,
Yeah.
so. If
Which
of those
we will
consensual
work to
circles somehow
codify.
I fall into the eligible to have the card, that's fine with me.
you're the winner.
Yeah.
No idea if I'm allowed to have the
You
card.
are the winner.
We will work to codify that.
Okay.
And we'll coordinate with M&T.
Yeah, if you guys do
and
that.
make
Okay.
sure that- I thought it was all clean already. So-
That's, yeah, part of the ongoing challenge that we're having. Yeah, thank you.
Well, somebody could take care of it now, right?
Mhm.
Rachel can take care of it.
Well, you started this one. You can finish it, Mike.
Okay, we'll get it taken care of.
Okay.
We'll get it just cleaned up to where
All right.
everything's gonna be new.
All right. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Amber or anything? No? Thank you. Thanks. All right. Audit. If you go to page 8 and 9 on low-key Brill reports, Steve was not able to be here today. As I mentioned, he's at a conference. He's speaking at a conference. So I am going to give the report on audit, which is low-key Brill reports. This essentially is we contract with them to monitor construction and workers on construction sites on our projects and to make sure that they're in compliance. And so if you look on page 8 and 9, you will see for the month of August, Innis had a total headcount of 6 workers were reported on site, and they were at 100% compliant. Romeo Enterprises, they had a headcount of 138 construction workers on site. Of those, 135 were compliant, 3 were not, with a compliance rate of 98%. You'll see on Romeo, on the back, you will see for the month prior, and then it will break down the different contractors that were on site, number of workers, and those that were non-compliant for that given month.
So, Chair, if I may, Benson Steel,
Yeah.
they're located out of Saugerties, so they're an Ulster County contractor. They're an erector crane company. The reason they had 1 compliant, those crane companies right now, there's a real high demand for crane operators right now. And if you can find a guy with a New York State license, you're very lucky. So what they do is they partner out of Albany with a union up in Albany. So they brought the guy in from Albany,
Great.
and he still worked through their books.
Yeah. So the good news is our projects are compliant. They're doing what they need to be doing. Another project that we have that's not on this list, but RBW Studios, 12 companies have been reported for this project and all have submitted their required documents. There's 7 companies that are currently working on site. All of them have submitted current copies of OSHA certificates and all the documentation that's required of them. Afira is expected to begin in November, and Low-Key Brill will follow up with them in mid-October to make sure that they're still scheduled for November. The Kingstonian development is still in approval stage, and that may not begin this year, but Low-Key Brill will follow up with them in November, just again to dot I's and cross T's on their end. And so that is the audit report. All right. Finance, I believe there's nothing to report from Finance. And now I'll turn it over to Chair of our Governance Committee, Mike Ham.
Thank you, Chair. So we recently had our governance, we had 2 meetings. We had one on the 8th of September, and we followed up with a second one prior to this meeting for the 15th of September. And I appreciate the committee members for the governance, responding and taking their time out to be here. One thing we had, which is, as Diane likes to say, keeping the lights on and the wheels spinning, we had some staffing and organizational, that was the hot topic right there, to get everybody back in working condition and what we needed to do to get through this admin period and start doing work for the county and the people of the county. So with that, Costube has been spearheading this big time. A lot of input from Lynn and I think they did great work, but I'm going to turn it over to Kostub and let him do a little presentation on what has been developed.
We can do the revolving door policy.
I'd like to do him first. I think he's going to be the lengthy one, and then I'll
keep
turn
it short.
I'll go over to Joe.
Okay.
I will.
All right.
Thank
Went
you,
out of
Mike.
order
We'll
of
flip
what we
them on
had.
the order. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Thank
Just
you,
wanted to
Mike.
make note of that.
So we can start with page 14. We have a slight slide deck, which might be easier to go through. And Lynn is on the phone, right?
Lynn, you still there?
Lynn?
It's all right. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure you're on. But the way we thought about this was to take the opportunity that we have right now, since we have certain things moving around and we have Amber helping on a temporary basis at this point. So we wanted to see how to think about the structure of the board such that it maintains a few objectives. One being independence, second, continuity, and then third, more importantly, transparency, as we all have been thinking about. So we started thinking from a structure standpoint what the bylaws have guided us to. And from that perspective, we devised that we know up till the board chair that we are reporting to the board, or sorry, the UCIDA and the legislature accordingly. However, we wanted to make sure that we are taking into account our council and also the reporting structure for other team members that might join, both from an office capacity or a manager standpoint, and also vendors. And we can go through this in detail now, but I'll quickly go through this quickly right now such that we are thinking about it rather than being prescriptive. And this is a living, breathing document, so suggestions are welcome both from this group and from the community. But more importantly, in the community, we wanted to, I'm on page 16 now, we wanted to focus on who are the entities, who are the delegates that we want to be communicating with and corresponding with on a regular basis. This is not a tiered system in any way. This is more representative of the community members or the stakeholders. But we wanted to include and be comprehensive with respect to being it with state overall, with other counties, but more importantly with the towns and hamlets and the villages that are in the county itself, and also the community members as we see from an applicant standpoint or others. So I'm happy to answer any questions, take a pause here if there are any, and go through the details as need be. So, no questions, but happy to address those again.
One
Yeah.
thing I think we should have clarity on here. So you'll see on this, you'll see on the charts, and you'll see executive director as opposed to CEO, just so everybody can note. Currently in our bylaws, it does read CEO. It's not a heavy lift. We need to alter the bylaws just to reflect that it's executive director. Okay?
Thank you, Mike. I was about to mention that, so I appreciate the
stole your
lead-in.
thunder.
No, you
See
did
that?
not. No, you did not. So I was going to mention that we did think in detail about resources and staffing. And to what Mike just mentioned, we also looked at peers outside Ulster County, both in the state and outside the state as well, to find out what the structure looked like really and what's most effective. So we didn't feel and believe that CEO might be the right way to go about it, but an executive director that's comparable with other IDAs and also other not-for-profit organizations. So that's how we thought through that. We also believe that there has to be, as defined by the bylaws, there has to be a role for the CFO/a finance manager, which a title for which we haven't determined yet. And these titles have to be not just commensurate with what other peers are doing, but also how we can attract talent. So it's being kept from a balanced standpoint. In an overview, we have defined what the pros and considerations would be from a standpoint that we are looking at a full-time staff and the leadership versus a mixed where it's full-time and vendor sourced or a fully contracted and outsourced team. We haven't decided which one is best suited. We wanted to bring it to the board and discuss as we feel fit, because there has to be some flexibility to maintain that independence as well. And then also there has to be some strength to it. Next few pages really detail as a summary and further details on what we believe the roles and responsibilities and the descriptions of the certain team members should be. So what we have outlined here is the executive director title as we described, and then an administrative manager. And towards the right, since we have questions on how every board member feels at this point or believes right now on 3 or 4 specific roles. One is finance, another is legal, third would be audiovisual, and other administrative. It's on the right hand side of the page under vendors. And the fourth would be real estate if we decide ever to have our own offices and how to deal with that. And if we are missing any, we are open to thinking about those roles as well. Certain roles, in my opinion, and I believe in the committee's opinion as well, especially legal, should be an external role, which it already is. And perhaps audiovisual as well, such that it's less burdensome. But we can determine that.
Would we put the PR comms vendor in that category?
And I think that's exactly right. So it's PR, communications, and also community relations, if you want. Any questions I can... The rest of the pages, and I'm trying to make sure that we are on time here. The rest of the pages detail the specific roles on how we believe the entities or the individuals should perform. We have defined certain traits and what role descriptions we believe should be meaningful, how we clarify things with respect to setting certain things in stone, but still having the flexibility to be able to attract and be able to discuss what the roles should be. That's all I have for now. We can go into details, we can discuss.
Any discussion? Any comments? Any input?
This is excellent.
This is really good.
Yeah.
I think it is extremely thoughtful. It is extremely helpful for me because I don't sit on the committee and I have to, sorry. I'll back up. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
I think it's very thoughtful, it's very thorough, and for someone who is not on the governance committee, so I wasn't a participant in the thought that went into it, it's extremely useful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I read it prior, I didn't just read it now.
The due diligence was absolutely done in this, and you know, I think they did a great job putting this together. Lynn was very, very spot on with her descriptions of the roles that everybody was going to be taking. And you know, in governance, we've discussed this, and I don't think we ever went into exempt session or executive session. We just kept it right on the floor the whole time in governance. But we discussed the fact that, you know, with the old admin leaving and then us going through this to restructure everything, which is what it says, you know, we don't want this to fall on the lap of any future IDA board. And, you know, there's some other mechanics that's going to be into play where we're discussing where if we do go to outside vendors or sign somebody on, that there's an overlap process in this also. So if this board is reelected every 2 years, maybe we go to a 3-year term with that and let it drift by. That's something, you know, we're going to put to Joe and let Joe take a hard look at all this. But once again, I'd like to touch base on, this is a work in progress and a living document. So everyone's input is more than welcome. And when we have a governance committee meeting, you are always welcomed at the governance committee. Anyone wants to come. They, you know, we take the input. We ask for everybody on that, you know, because this affects everything. The governance, you know, where policy changes, and it's nice to have a fresh set of eyes on it. So,
if I
go ahead,
if I
Lynn.
could make a comment or two, I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out. Can you hear me? Okay. This is a good place to start to try and figure out. Can you hear me? Okay. This is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the role is. And I think that this is a good place to start to try and figure out what the
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. A good place to start, we've got a short-term contract with the legislative staff. We can assess how things are working there. I think we should also see who's out there for any of these roles. But being very clear, we're sorting through our organization structure. And I think it gives us an opportunity to really look at what is the best way to maintain our goal of independence and transparency, but how we leverage available resources and look at the organization structure and what's the best way to move forward. So, again, to the points that both Kashtuv and Mike made, this is a living document. We're in the midst of assessing all these various components with the resources we have and how do we move forward. So I think it's kind of an ongoing review, because we also have to price out some of the different scenarios that are present on the pros and cons page. It does require staffing, it requires benefits, it requires a lot of understanding of the cost of setting up each of the potential organization structures. And at the end, we may come out with a hybrid, we may come out with one of the specifics, but I think it's something that as we go forward, we're going to have to assess, every step, what's working, what's not, how do we make it better to ensure that regardless of who's on the board in any given year, there is a team supporting the efforts, that projects are still followed through on, new members are oriented, and there is a core team that is helping people to become familiar with the work of the IDA.
Very well said.
I just a few thoughts. First, great work. The thoroughness, the thoughtfulness that went into this, and the way in which you framed all of this is just really quite good. And I thank the governance committee for bringing this to the full board. I think I agree with everything that has been shared. I also wanted to just put this out that I think if we can come to some consensus, maybe not today, but the next board meeting, about these are the roles that we think are important and need to be filled, that we can agree on that, and then do the work of finding the individuals and or entities and vendors and companies that will fill these roles, because I think that this is a living document and should be. On the other hand, I also know that our contract with the legislative staff is over in February, and what I don't want us to be in a position that we don't have these resources in place when it comes to February, or if we continue on with the legislative staff, that's great. But I just don't want us to be back in that place where we find ourselves transitioning again. Because part of our agreement with the legislative staff is that they will provide training to whoever, if we move into that direction, whoever may be taking over those responsibilities after February. So I just want to be, really clear about that and ask governance to ensure that we can keep that going. And I know we have a contract with Norman, who will help us find candidates, and we might have our own as well. So.
And Chair, that's extremely helpful, because one of the objectives that we had today was to kind of define the next steps, such that we are keeping on track as well, not just from an identification of roles, but also if there is anything else that we should be adding from a resource standpoint, we should identify now such that we can implement that.
And I agree with it, what everybody's commenting on here. And I also, I know this is the first time some of the board members are seeing this. So between now and the next meeting, I believe there should be a lot of input. You guys can review this. Go through it. If you see something, I suggest you reach out to the chair, and the chair will trickle it down to the committee and say, hey, we have this or that. Send us an email.
It can go directly to you.
Okay.
And the committee,
All
that's
right.
fine. Yeah.
I can share the PowerPoint document.
And once again, I said it once, I said it 10 times. This was great work, okay? And a lot of time went into it. And I think sometimes the community thinks we just meet here for an hour and a half, and that's not the truth. Everybody here's got a full-time job. And everybody is working hard at making this successful. So it was great work, and I look forward to seeing what everybody's comments and input's going to be coming along here before the next meeting. So I thank you. Thank you very much.
It's time well spent.
Yeah, and I would just ask everyone to seriously take a time and read through this. This is really important for us, and to get your feedback directly to Mike or anybody else on the governance committee or me, but you can go to them directly. And then I would ask governance to take those comments and be prepared to come back next month to make your recommendations so that we can actually get approval consensus from the board that these are the roles, and then we can start moving
Correct. We'll
forward.
have to circle in with Joe on council and
Yeah, and I
to
also
get all
say
this
also
drafted
with
up.
Amber, just in terms of the
Amber.
financial piece of this is also obviously very important, and we should have a better idea where we are financially, where our financials are moving forward, to
So
best
s-
support the structure that we're going to move forward with.
So speaking of Joe, we did in governance also, we currently have an NDA policy. I'm sorry. Chair?
Oh, yeah, what page, this is page, I'm sorry, I just wanted 10, thank you.
Page 10. So we currently have a NDA policy in effect right now. We wanted to broaden the scope of this a little bit. So Joe has come up, with this policy. We spoke about it. Lynn was a big part of that, and Kostub, and, we had a nice hearty conversation over this, and we introduced it to Joe. So, Joe, if you would, could you just bring everybody into fold onto the language for this policy?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. So it's page 10 of your materials, and as Mike indicated, following his second governance committee meeting, he reached out to me and asked for my thoughts about this policy and putting something together. He also indicated that he wanted to act quickly in terms of getting something in front of the board. So we did work pretty quickly late last week and early this week to get something together and out to the board on Monday. This is a draft. There's a draft slug up at the upper left-hand side of the document. So I'll say it one more time. This is a draft for your consideration. There is precedent for this type of policy at the state level and the federal level. I think probably all of you have read stories about people within government moving outside of government into private practice and vice versa, and having some restrictions there on that movement back and forth. I think it's consistent with the tack that the board has taken under Mike and the chair's leadership with respect to transparency and openness, that we want to be careful about ethics, we want to be careful about conflicts, and so this really fits into that overall theory and philosophy with respect to good practice. With respect to the document itself, we tried to make it look consistent with other policies from a format standpoint of the IDA. You'll note that in the definition section, we define agency to include both the IDA and the CRC. That might be a shorthand. Maybe we want to break that out and have two separate documents, one specific for the CRC, which would look exactly like the one for the IDA. So I think that's a form and style situation. The substance is really in section 4 of the document, which is printed page 11 of the handout. A is the concept of lobbying. B is the concept of new projects. And then C is the concept of existing projects, or projects where we said no and there's some ongoing contact. So again, we tried to address the ideas that were raised by Mike, by Kostub, by Lynn, in that call that we had. We tried to address those. In B, the 1 year was a dart at the wall. We can certainly do a little research if the board wants in terms of what is market with respect to that freeze period. Is it 1 year? Is it 18 months? Is it 2 years? And that's really it, Chair. So back to you and to Mike.
Thank you, Joe. So if everybody takes you're seeing this, I don't know if you've seen this for the first time, if you got the documents previously, you went through it. This is a broad brushstroke, you know what I mean? So this is going to cover a lot of things moving ahead. We also, anybody that is involved on any aspect with the IDA or handling matters at the IDA, we're going to make sure we start following up on these NDAs. So, if you have anybody in your current offices that are handling anything for you, they too will be subject to this, okay? And, it's basically, this is where we're at.
And if I may, this is, as we discussed during the committee, this is not supposed to be unreasonably restrictive.
No.
It's simply to protect the board and the community and IDA most importantly. So if, to your point about term, if it has to be lesser or greater, we should consider that. But it is not in any way supposed to be punitive to a person who's employed such that they're not attracted to come here and work.
Correct. That is correct.
That would be my
Yep.
initial concern, particularly with vendors, which I think
That's
would
right.
be covered, that there would be a disincentive to work with us if we're tying their hands for,
A year.
or 6 months or 2 years.
That was a concern for everybody here, speaking with Joe. That's why we put in Joe's corral, okay, to make sure that we were not being punitive or restricting anybody's activity to come before the board.
Right,
So-
and this makes sense to me. I'm not
Okay.
suggesting that it is. I'm noting that it's the concern, but not an unreasonable response to what it is accomplishing.
I also mentioned to Joe about, Joe, and maybe you'll help me out with this, about grandfather clausing someone in if we act upon this. Is it, so to speak, if it was 5 months ago, 6 months ago, 7 months ago that somebody was here, is it time served, so to speak, and is it included in the year of the,
Well, we couldn't apply it retroactively.
correct. That was my question to Joe. Do we retro it with people? How do we do?
Well, that I think is something that we want to discuss.
Correct.
Right?
Okay.
And that's why this is a draft,
Right, that's right.
so.
So this is just similar to a non-compete clause.
No, not
No?
really. A non-compete, that was another discussion, Rashida.
Okay.
That was a hot topic too, is non-compete, because I think when you say a non-compete, you're almost, nobody from this board is going to leave here and go create an IDA. So we're pretty comfortable in that aspect, okay? I think when we do get, and Joe, maybe I should be quiet at this point because I'm going to jam myself up. So Joe, can you discuss a little further about a non-compete to this revolving door policy?
Yeah, I think Mike actually gave you a pretty good example. I mean, a non-compete is typically in the private sector context, where you have a business with principals within that business, and you probably had 35. The two of you have had hundreds of experiences in that situation where the principals sell, and as one of the conditions to sale is we're not going to form a similar business the next day and compete with the business that we just sold. So that's the typical context there. Your issue about vendors, I think we need, I mean, that got me thinking. I don't think that those are caught under agency employee, so I think vendors are okay. But, we want to make sure that we're not affecting anyone like that.
I'm just sorry, how would we define
If I
vendor,
may?
though?
Well,
If I may,
1 second, Lynn. Joe was just answering one question.
yeah, well, I think vendors aren't, we could actually put a proviso there and say vendors aren't included within the definition of agency employee. And by vendor, I think what you're talking about is someone like, like our would this cover our PR person? I don't think it's intended to cover our PR person, right? Because the PR person isn't, working inside our office,
So-
so to speak.
The
you
way
know?
we were thinking that day, not to interrupt if I am, is any entity or individual that can influence the decision-making process from the IDA or for the applicant. That's more importantly that we're trying to
Yeah,
avoid.
okay, yeah.
So I don't think an audiovisual person or a PR entity would be subject to this unless they're taking out some information and disseminating it, which is not reasonable. That's a different part of the NDA. I think that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Joe, quick question.
If,
Oh, I'm sorry, Lynn, go ahead. You had a question. I'm sorry.
yeah, I think it was more a point of clarification. I think our intent here is not to adversely impact vendors who are doing business with us unless they're privy to confidential inside information and the workings on a confidential basis. Because that really is, I think, where we were coming from. People who are helping support the internal workings would have an advantage over, anybody else coming in. And so the whole point here was fairness and a level playing field for all projects coming before this board. And I think that really was our intent in this. I know that was where I was coming from.
Okay.
So, Joe, is that something we can be explicit about in
Sure, we
this?
can-
I
we
think
can-
that's
we can-
important to
yeah,
distinguish
define it.
between
Yeah, we can
a vendor
move-
and the types of services
Yeah,
they're actually
we can
providing
move-
to the
move that.
agency. Okay.
Good. That's a great point, Lynn, and maybe we need more clarity on what the vendor is as opposed to, so. Great.
Again, maybe privy to inside information that could be leveraged in a project application.
Okay. So, is there any other discussion on this policy? Joe will,
Well, I guess my question is one of process. Did you want, I can do some updates. Did you want to refer it back to governance? Have governance have a meeting between now and our October meeting, and then we approve it at the October meeting?
Yeah, I think governance will be meeting again anyway to come back with their recommendations for organizational structure, and you
Yeah,
can
we
add
have
that
both
to
of
your
these.
agenda.
Yeah, okay.
So that makes sense, Joe.
plus we'll need you to put that together too, if we're gonna. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yep.
correct.
Right. Thank you. Great
Very
work in the
good.
governance committee.
Yeah, good work.
And that's the governance report, Chair.
Thank you. Great. Moving along. So absorbed in the conversation, I lost the agenda. All right. Old business. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. The status of pending projects is described on page 24. Nothing new to report there. I'm happy to go into detail on anything, but it's really a repeat of the last meeting, and therefore I won't go into any detail unless the board wants me to do so.
I'm sorry, Cresco, I did want to have a quick update from, again, with conversation with Tim.
Oh, good.
So just so you all know, Cresco, they're moving forward on the property. The property's been finalized and the work on the property, but the construction project itself has not moved forward. They had equity investors lined up, and I think with some delay in regulations and a bill that is expected to be passed to allow for commercial banks to lend to these projects, some of the initial equity investors related to Cresco are not as interested, I should say. And so right now Cresco is waiting for this bill to pass for commercial banking and to go back through commercial banking to fund the project on the construction side of it. And so that they're expecting that to happen very soon. But I share this with you because depending how that financial structure looks, They may or may not need to come back to the board, given any of those changes. We don't expect to, but I just wanted to share that.
Great. And then on the enforcement matters, which was the next item under my purview, Chair, I don't have anything new to report there. I'll reach out to the city assessor to follow up on if they want us to take any action on that matter that we terminated. That's been sitting there for several months now. They have preliminarily indicated that they would like us to take some action, but I need your assistance to complete the bill because you're the ones that collect the money, and so they need to tell us what they want us to collect.
Right.
So I'll push on that and hopefully have a resolution one way or the other for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. New business. There is no new business. So may I have a motion to adjourn the IDA meeting at 10:40 a.m.?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. We'll take a short break before we move into the CRC meeting. We just keep moving along. You were smart. You wore a sweater. Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ulster County Capital Resource Corporation meeting on September 21st, 2022 at 10:45 a.m. I'd like to call our meeting to order, and we'll begin with roll call. Lynn? Mike?
Present.
Steve Kelly is absent with notice. Rashida?
Here.
Rachel?
Here.
And Kastu?
Here.
Thank you. All right, moving right along. The mission statement of the Ulster County Capital Resource Corporation is to promote community and economic development in Ulster County in ways that complement the work of Ulster County, primarily through issuing and selling bonds for nonprofit institutions. I'd like to call your attention to page 3 of your meeting packet, and that need your approval of the minutes from our August 17th meeting. Please review, and when you're ready, a motion to accept these minutes.
I would just note that I think Mike's name is missing from the listed attendees. We were there.
You were there, so noted, and we can revise these minutes as such. Thank you, Amber. Thank.
Move to approve.
Yes.
Just say it one more time.
Amend and accept.
Amend and accept.
Thank you. Second.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I've never really been forgotten before.
How does that feel?
How are you feeling? You doing okay over there?
I'm gonna,
Are you okay?
last night I happened to be on the legislative floor and they brought the therapy support dog up. I may need the help of the dog.
We'll get you one next month. We'll have our IDA support
A
dog
puppy.
present. Yeah, we can take turns rotating who take care of us
Okay.
for a month. Okay.
Might not get him back though.
All right. I guess that's our public comment, although it's not on agenda items. No public comment. None. All right. Amber, we'll just make note of your update that you gave us for the IDA was all applicable to the CRC as well, correct? Okay, thank you. Chair's report, nothing to report, just reflected in, well, actually nothing to report. Old business, no new business, and may we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.